Welcome to The Last Whisper. Leave your like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next dark stories. There was an old house at the end of a narrow street, forgotten by almost everyone in town. The windows were covered with dust, the roof full of holes, and the gate had creaked for years without being opened. Yet, despite its abandonment, many swore there was always someone watching from behind the torn curtains. It wasn't unusual to hear neighbors whisper, "No one lives there, but there's always a shadow moving through the living room." What made that house even stranger was the story of the mirror kept inside. A huge mirror with a gilded frame that seemed to have survived intact even after everything else rotted away. According to legend, that mirror held a disturbing secret. It never reflected whoever stood before it. Imagine yourself standing in front of a mirror and seeing absolutely nothing. Not the outline of your silhouette, not your shadow, not the slightest sign that you exist. Only the room behind you, as if you weren't there at all. Many said the mirror didn't simply deny the reflection. It seemed to steal something from anyone who dared stare at it for too long. The first time I heard this story was from an elderly neighbor named Donna Carmam. She claimed she had entered the house as a child, drawn by curiosity along with two friends. While exploring, they found the mirror in the main hall, covered by a white sheet. Driven by the boldness of childhood, they decided to pull the sheet away. What they saw took their breath away. The three of them stood before the object, but none of them could see themselves. Only the room behind them reflected in perfect detail. One of the boys, to challenge his fear, raised his right hand. In the mirror, nothing happened. He clapped, pulled faces, even pressed his face against the cold surface, but the reflection insisted on showing only the empty room. Then Donna Carmam noticed a shadow in the corner of the reflected image. A shadow that did not exist in the real room. That shadow moved slowly, as if watching the three children, with no body or defined shape. Terrified, they covered the mirror and ran out of the house. From that day on, she said she felt watched whenever she walked past the gate. Time went by, people avoided the house, but there was always someone curious enough to challenge the legend. Teenagers broke in to prove their courage and always left terrified. Some claimed to have seen shapes moving inside the glass. Others swore the mirror whispered names. Then a controversial case forever marked the town. A young man named Andre vanished after entering the house with friends. They swore he was beside them when they pulled the sheet from the mirror, but in the reflection he simply didn't appear. There was no shadow, nothing. Just a void. At that moment, Andre supposedly turned to his friends and whispered, "Do you see that?" No one understood who he was referring to, but seconds later he collapsed to the floor as if fainting. His friends, terrified, tried to rouse him, but he didn't respond. When they ran to the door for help, Andre was gone. No trace, no sound of escape, nothing. It was as if he had been swallowed by the mirror itself. The disappearance was never explained. The friends told their story to the police, but few believed them. The house was sealed by the authorities, but that only fed the legend. As with all things forbidden, curiosity only grew. Over the years, others risked sneaking inside. From time to time, mysterious disappearances were still attributed to that mirror. Parents forbade their children from walking down that street. Drivers steered wide, and even ghost hunters tried to record phenomena. But all videos and photos taken inside came out with strange flaws. The mirror always appeared blurred, even in high resolution. Years later, I decided to investigate the story myself. My curiosity would not let me rest. I had to see it with my own eyes. I grabbed a camera and a flashlight and went to the house on a full moon night. The street was deserted, silent. The gate screamed when I pushed it, as if crying out to the world that someone had entered. The air inside the house was heavy, smelling of mold and rust. The floorboards creaked with every step. I walked through the corridors, noticing broken furniture, peeling wallpaper, and spider webs that looked like they hadn't been disturbed in decades. Then I reached the main hall. There it was, covered with the same dusty sheet Donna Carmam had described. For a few seconds I stood motionless, listening only to my own breathing. Part of me said to leave, but another part pushed me forward. In a quick motion, I pulled the cloth away. The impact was immediate. I wasn't there. Neither my camera nor my flashlight. Nothing. Only the empty hall was reflected, every detail perfect except for me. I stepped closer, trying to make sense of it. I touched the surface. It was as cold as ice. It felt as if my presence didn't exist for that object. Then I noticed. In the lower left corner of the reflection, there was a shadow. There was nothing in that corner of the real room, but in the mirror, the shadow moved slowly, twisting like smoke. A chill ran down my spine. The shadow seemed to stare at me, even without eyes. I didn't see myself, but it saw me. And in that moment, I realized something more disturbing. The shadow began to mimic my gestures. I raised my hand, and the shadow raised its arm too, but with a terrifying detail. When I raised my right hand, it raised its left as if an inverted reflection, but without me. Second by second, it seemed to gain shape and consistency. A sensation of emptiness hit me, as if something was sucking my strength away. I tried to cover the mirror again, but the sheet had fallen away and I couldn't move. My hands shook around the camera. On the camera's screen, I saw something impossible. In the lens's reflection, the shadow was much closer to me than it appeared in reality. Then I heard a whisper, low, inside my head. "You are no longer here." The words echoed in my mind, though no sound filled the room. My body froze, the air grew heavy, and it felt as if I were being pulled into that cold surface. Behind the shadow, more figures appeared, blurred, faceless, pressing their hands against the glass. I ran, covered the mirror, and escaped the house. But the mirror never truly let me go. Since that night, reflections no longer follow me. Cracks appear in my mirrors. Shadows whisper in the dark, and I know one day the mirror will claim me completely. If you ever pass a mirror and notice your reflection hesitate before moving, don't look again. Run. Because you might hear the same whisper I did. You are no longer here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to The Last Whisper, leave your like and turn on the bell so you never miss the next chilling video.